going on, everybody? Welcome back to Talkin Sports with Jake. Hope we're all doing well. Let's start with some baseball scores. You had the Yankees over the Mariners 10-4. Guardians over the Orioles 5-0. Royals over the Cardinals 7-0. Cardinals continue to struggle. Twins over the Astros 7-5. Giants over the Pirates 14-4. Angels over the White Sox 6-4. Rangers over the Tigers 5-0. Cubs over the Rays 1-0. Diamondbacks over the Rockies 7-5. Athletics pick up a win. It's now an 11-game losing streak. They beat the Braves 7-2, and the Dodgers beat the Nationals 6-1. The San Diego Padres claimed Gary Sanchez off waivers. He fell on 3 teams. He had originally signed. I don't even remember where he signed. He signed somewhere, and they dumped him. Then the Mets claimed him off waivers. They signed him to a minor league deal. He was in AAA. Yeah, and then the rule is when you sign a guy to a minor league deal, if you don't call him up, I think within like 2 weeks, they can opt out of their contract and then go back on the open market and sign somewhere else. Maybe if they think they can sign a major league contract and be maybe a backup somewhere on a major league club opposed to playing in minor leagues, especially when you're a veteran like Sanchez. And like a day before his contract ended, they had to call him up after he did hit well in AAA. He only played 3 games. Nothing special. I think one of the games he had a hit or two, but the other 2 didn't really do much. He only played 3 games. He was the backup for Francisco Alvarez, the Mets breakout rookie, because Tomas Nido was still injured, and now Omar Narvaez, their other catcher, who's been out since April, is on his way back. And the Mets catcher situation was getting a little bit tricky because he had Alvarez, who was playing really well. Obviously, you can't send him back down, and then like, all right, what do? Do you keep Sanchez? What do you do with Tomas Nido? Do you keep him? Do you look to trade him? Do you DFA him? What happens when Omar Narvaez comes back? Probably in a week or 2. But the Mets DFA'd Sanchez, and the Padres just claimed them for some deaths. We'll see what happens. The Milwaukee Brewers have designated Luke Voit for assignment. He's very struggled this year. He hit just 221 this year. Does not have a single home run. He was there to bring some power, and he hasn't been able to do so. So the Brewers just DFA'd him. And speaking of a guy who was recently DFA'd, Aaron Hicks, from Yankees outfield, the Baltimore Orioles are considering signing him. Their center fielder Cedric Mullins is hurt. He came out of the game the other day. Might have been last night with a groin slash adductor strain. He's dealing with that injury. Still not sure if he's going to go on the IL or not. So the Orioles might pick up Aaron Hicks maybe to take his place while Mullins recovers from his injury. Let's talk about some hockey. Vegas Golden Knights demolished the Dallas Stars 6-0 in Game 6. They win that series in 6 games, and they advance to the Stanley Cup final. They've only been around, I think, 6 years, and it's their second time going to the Cup final, first since their inaugural season, 2018. They lost to the Washington Capitals that year. They will face off against the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup. I believe Game 1 is June 3rd, which I believe is Saturday. I'll double check that. I'll confirm that tomorrow. But the Cup final will be the Vegas Golden Knights against the Florida Panthers. Last night, William Karlsson had a big game, 2 goals and an assist. William Carrier had a goal and an assist. Aiden Hill had 23 save shutout. He's played really well, stepping in for all the injuries the Golden Knights have had this year in net. Dallas got absolutely dominated. I was watching the Celtics Heat game because that was Game 7. I'll get to that very shortly. I'm like, all right, maybe at halftime, I flip to the hockey game and catch some of that. And then I get an alert on my phone that Vegas is up 4-0 through 2 periods. I'm like, might as well watch it inside the NBA's halftime show. And this game appears to be over, so. But Knights go to the Cup final. Obviously, Golden Knights, they had the best record in the Western Conference versus the Florida Panthers, who are an 8 seed. Got 2 8 seeds in the finals in 2 leagues here. That's crazy. Both play in South Florida, which is also crazy. For who I think wins, I think it'll be a really good series. You got Vegas, you got a team like Florida, who's really good offensively, and obviously Sergei Bobrovsky ever since he became the full-time starter in the playoffs in Game 3 of the first round against Boston. He has been absolutely incredible, been standing on his head versus Vegas, who their offense has been up and down this year. They dealt some injuries, but they're really good defensively. And Aiden Hill has stepped up in that. I think it'll be a really good series. I'm going to take the Golden Knights in 6 games. I think they're overall a better team. That being said, Florida has been technically the worst off team in all 3 series, obviously, against Boston. Florida was the team that just snuck in by the skin of their teeth against the greatest regular season team ever. And Florida came back, I think, down 3-1 in that series to somehow beat them in 7 games. Then they played in second round, played Toronto, who on paper was a better team than them. They beat them in 5, and then in the conference finals, they played Carolina, who on paper was a better team than them, and they swept them. So Florida is on fire right now. They got a hot goalie. They are really good offensively. But then they play Vegas, who I think Vegas is a team that has kind of fallen under the radar. Like for most of the season, they were in first place in Western Conference. They had middle of the season, they had one little stretch for 2 or 3 weeks where they weren't playing it. They slept like out of the top 3, kind of hung around 3rd, 4th. Then they got right back on their horse. They dealt with a lot of injuries this year. And they've done a really good, Paul Maurice done a really good job. Of course, he was with the Winnipeg Jets for a long time. Then he retired mid-season a couple of years ago. They came out of retirement to coach the Vegas Golden Knights this season, and he's done a really good job. He's gotten them to the Cup final, despite dealing with all the injuries that they've dealt with. Haven't had Mark Stone arguably their best player really all season. And they're in the Cup final. I think they're an overall better team. Florida might be a little better offensively, but Vegas is much better defensively. Goaltending, Florida probably is a little better. They're both very well coached. Bruce Cassidy was the guy who the Bruins let go of after last season. Was a little questionable. A lot of people weren't sure, including myself, if it was the right move. And he got a job pretty quickly. Florida ended up picking him up. So I had to bring him in, and that's been a really good move. Looking back, during the regular season, it looked like Boston made the right move at the end of the day, because Jim Montgomery had a very team that had a very similar team. Obviously the best team in the league compared to Boston last year. I think was only like 5th in the East, and they lost in the first round. But then Boston loses in the first round with a 3-1 lead to an 8 seed, and then Bruce Cassidy takes Florida. Cassidy beats his old team and takes this team to the Stanley Cup. So clearly, Boston should not have let go of Bruce Cassidy, if you ask me. But it'll be a really good series. I think Vegas is much better defensively, which is big in the playoffs. Florida's better offensively, but Vegas can score as well. They're a little inconsistent. But we saw, when they're on, they're as good as anybody else. They can score the best. Obviously, they played a team in Dallas that's very good defensively. They got good goaltending, and Jake Ottinger, and they put up 6 goals last night. And obviously, Sergei, I would take Sergei also over Aiden Hill. Sergei's been amazing. He's been the best goalie in this entire postseason. But Aiden Hill's also playing really, really well right now. And he's got a better group in front of him. So I'll take Vegas in 6. I could easily see him going down, but I'll say Vegas in 6. Got some more coaching news. Nashville Predators fired John Hines, and they immediately hired Andrew Brunette. I think this is a good hire. He was an assistant coach with the Devils this year. Last year, he was an assistant coach with Florida. Took over as the interim head coach after Joe Quenneville was fired, after the allegations came out that he covered up everything with the Blackhawks back in 2010 when he was coaching in Chicago. And of course, he's not allowed to get a job right now, and he's meeting with the NHL to try to get reinstated. They promoted him. He did a phenomenal job. He led Florida to the President's Trophy, but unfortunately, they ended up losing in the second round to Tampa, who ended up, of course, going to the Cup final, then lost to Colorado. And I was surprised when they didn't keep him around. He was a Jack Adams finalist, but he got an assistant coach job with New Jersey, and now he's back as a full-time head coach in Nashville. Nashville's been stuck in mediocrity for a long time. John Hines, he was coaching with Devils for a bit. Wasn't great. Went to Nashville, had some success. I don't think he ever got out of like the first or the second round. And he's out, and Nashville bringing the injured net. My New York Rangers are looking at John Hines. I'm not a fan of him. I don't think he's that great of a coach. He wasn't great in New Jersey. He was meh in Nashville. I wouldn't look too far into him. Washington Capitals have found a new head coach. They have hired Spencer Carberry as the next head coach. Carberry, he was an assistant coach with the Maple Leafs the last 2 seasons. Prior to that, he actually was the Washington Capitals AHL coach. It's basically like AAA, the top minor league squad in minor league in the AHL. So he may know a bunch of the players because he was the AHL coach for Washington for 3 seasons prior to being an assistant in Toronto. He retired in 2010, and then he became an assistant coach in the ECHL. He took I think it's like in South Carolina or something, and he took over that team within like a year. He was there for 5 seasons, had a lot of success there. I think in 2014, he was the ECHL Coach of the Year, whatever league he was in. Then he became the Capitals AHL coach, was there for 3 seasons, had a lot of success there, was Coach of the Year. 3 years ago, he was like the AHL Coach of the Year. In the last 2 seasons, he was an assistant with Toronto, and now he's a head coach in Washington. That was a little bit of an out of the box hire. That being said, NHL loves to just recycle the same retread coaches over and over again. It's nice to see, a young guy who's not, quite, as well known. You see, all these older guys that are on the market. Gerard Gallant, Bruce Boudreau, John Hines, Pierre Laviolette. It's the same guy. Just keep circling. And they just keep reusing basically, and they bring him back to the playoffs. Like, oh wow, this is a good coach. But then 2 or 3 years later, they can't get out of the first or second round. Like, wait a minute, we peaked 3 years ago. Now we need a new coach again. So I like teams that have a little balls and they go outside the box and they take a chance on a young assistant coach who's never been a head coach before, and they bank on all right. They've had success at other levels. Like Carberry, he had a good 5-year run in the ECHL. He had a good 3-year run in the AHL. He's been an assistant coach for a couple of years. He's a guy he worked for a lot of good players in Toronto, a lot of talented players in Toronto. Washington's their special team struggled last year, especially on the power play. They were, I think, ranked 16th, so right in the middle of the road. Toronto had the second best power play in the league. I think Carberry was the assistant coach in charge of that, so I think he'll bring that to Washington. So you got obviously Alex Ovechkin, who's still an amazing player. Kuznetsov. There's no reason they can't be an elite power play. So I think, although it's, when you first read the headline, they hired Spencer Carberry, you're like, who the heck is that? When you really look into it, he's got a pretty decent resume. And is he ready to be a head coach? He's still pretty young, on the younger-ish side, but I think, Washington's in a bit of a transition. They missed the playoffs for the first time in quite a few years this year. As team that's getting older, obviously Ovechkin, who obviously is one of the all-time greats, and he's still one of the league's best players. He's got to be 37, 38 years old. Team's is getting a little bit older, so they may need to go into a retooling phase, and they probably need then more younger coach help them guide them through that, and that's what they get with Carberry. So the remaining head coach openings is Calgary, probably just brought in a new GM. They promoted Craig Conroy, so maybe now their head coach will amp up a little bit. The New York Rangers, the Anaheim Ducks, as well as the Columbus Blue Jackets. On to basketball, the Miami Heat defeated the Boston Celtics 103-84 in Game 7. They advanced to the NBA Finals. Jimmy Butler had 28 points, 26 points and 10 rebounds for Caleb Martin, who had a great series. I think he averaged like 23 and 7 in the series. What a year for the Heat. What a run. They are an 8 seed. They were in the play-in. They were the 7th best team in the East. regular season, but they lost to Atlanta in the first playing game. And then in the second playing game, they were actually down by 3 to the Bulls with like 2 minutes to go. But they were able to sneak out of that game and win. And obviously, they've had an incredible run. They shocked the world and beat the league's best team, the Milwaukee Bucks, in 5 games in the first round. Then they upset a small upset with the New York Knicks, beating them in 6 games in the second round. And another huge upset with the Boston Celtics. They were obviously go up 3-0. Celtics win 3 in a row. Obviously, game 6, he had a very sloppy game between the two teams. Derek White hits the leg with 0.1 to go as time expired to force game 7. Boston goes home thinking they're going to win, and then Heat came out, played really well. Jimmy Butler had 28 points. Caleb Martin, he's been brilliant this series. I know Perry's gotten some flack this year, for the way this team is built. The playmaking, he's got too many undrafted guys. They don't score enough yet. And they have 9 undrafted players on this team. 4 of the 8 guys that are in this rotation, in their 8-man rotation, the playoffs are undrafted. But look, they've got to the finals, and there's obviously Jimmy Butler was a free agent signing. He was even when he was drafted by the Bulls, I don't think he was that high of a pick. Bam Adebayo was a late lottery pick. Tyler Hero, who I'm hearing they'll get back around game 3 to finals, was a late lottery pick. Caleb Martin was undrafted. Obviously, Kyle Lowry was a free agent signing. Toronto didn't even draft him that high. Duncan Robinson's undrafted. Pat Riley knows how to find talent. So, although as improbable as his team is, the team that he's built is in the finals, and they were in the conference finals last year too. And obviously, in the bubble, they were also in the finals. So Heat are in the finals for the second time in the last 4 years. They've been to the conference finals obviously for 3 of the last 4 years. Jimmy Butler, what a run he's on. He is such a great player. He might be one of the greatest. He's one of the greatest Miami Heat players of all time. He averaged 37 points a game in the first round on 60% shooting. He played great in the second round against the Knicks. And then in the conference finals, he averaged over 24 points a game in the 7 games, and he was named the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Caleb Martin, he really stepped up. He averaged like 23 points, 7 rebounds. It's a guy who, also these two teams met in the conference finals last year. Boston won in 7. Caleb Martin really wasn't a factor. He didn't even play in Game 7 last year, and then obviously you see even in Game 6 he played well. I think he had like 23 and 13 or something, and 26 and 10, 4 of 6 from downtown. And helped big reason why the Miami Heat picked up the win. He was arguably the best player on the floor. When it comes to the Boston Celtics, they played horrible. The first play of the game, Tatum drives to the hoop and he rolls his ankle. He clearly wasn't right the whole game, but still, he's a superstar. He's got to step up. He's got to play through it. There have been great players in every sport that have played hurt and still had great games. Michael Jordan had food poisoning. Need his teammates to carry him up and down the court. He dropped like 60 points in a playoff game. Kawhi Leonard's hip wasn't healthy that whole season 2019. He was limping up and down the court in that postseason run. He was dropping 35 points a game. He was Finals MVP. Kurt Angle, this is a completely out of the box thing. He's a wrestler for a wrestling company that the wrestling isn't even technically real. He won an Olympic gold medal with a broken freaking neck. So Tatum playing on a tweaked ankle should still be able to lead the Boston Celtics. And he was terrible, had just 12 points. And Jaylen Brown, oh my God, he was horrible, absolutely pitiful. What was he like? 8 of 23, 1 of 9 from 3, 8 turnovers. He turned the ball over 8 times. He was absolutely atrocious. And nobody else did much. Derek White played well, but Smart didn't do a whole lot. Horford didn't do a whole lot. Robert Williams was in and out of the game a lot with with injuries. Apparently, he was dealing with a stomach virus and he was throwing up during Game 7. The report that just came out. Shams just tweeted that only a couple minutes ago. Actually, I had to look at my notification on my phone to even just to confirm that. Just a horrible performance. By the way, I don't think Joe Mazzulla is the right coach of this team. I don't think he's a bad coach, but the Celtics are a team. This team is good enough to win a championship. They were in the finals last year, obviously with Ime Udoka as their coach. They were, team in the in the first half of the season was kind of struggled, was a little inconsistent. People were saying they should trade Jaylen Brown or trade Jason Tatum. In the second half of the season, they were the best team in the league. They had the best. They were the best team defensively. They were one of the best 3-point shooting teams. Ime Udoka was a coach of the year candidate. Jason Tatum was an MVP candidate. They'll be a top 5 player in the game in the second half. And of course, they went all the way to the finals until they lost to Golden State. Didn't help with Jason Tatum. Had a really tough NBA finals playing with a broken wrist or broken shoulder, whatever, separated shoulder, whatever the heck he had. Obviously, with Udoka, he something happened behind the scenes. Apparently, he had an affair with a female staff member, consensual affair with a female staff member of the Celtics. There's rumors it was the wife of the team's CEO. So they ended up suspending him for the entire season. Of course, he just took the head coach job with the Houston Rockets. And they promoted their top assistant, Joe Mazzulla. I've heard a lot of the players never really got over that. I don't think they loved how it was handled. They just thought, they kind of jumped the gun on Udoka, suspending him for the entire season. Remember, the NBA didn't do anything. Remember, this is a consensual relationship. Cheating on his wife, who he has a child with. Obviously, that's not a moral thing to do, but he did not commit a crime, and the NBA did not do anything about it. The Celtics themselves suspended him for the season, right before the season. I just don't think that. I think a lot of the players didn't really love how it was handled. Like, right, you bring this guy in, his first year takes the team to the finals, and because one thing happened, he did not commit a crime. The NBA did not punish him at all, and you suspend him for the entire season in a year where the goal was to win a championship or anything else really didn't matter to them. Come on, I think that's what they were thinking. I think the Celtics need more experienced coach, a guy who's like got a little bit more balls. Like last year when the Celtics were struggling in the playoffs, if Tatum or Brown was struggling, you would see he would call him out. He would go up to Tatum or Brown and get in their face, like, dude, like you gotta be better. You gotta start hitting your shots. You gotta if you see an open guy, pass the basketball. With Joe Mazzulla, you really don't see that. I mean, he's a little too laid back, a little too soft for this team. I think he eventually could be a championship level coach, but he's not a championship level coach right now. Like obviously the first he was a guy who throughout the regular season, I thought his inexperience kind of showed at times. His clock management I never thought was very good. Sometimes I personally thought this guy thought that this timeouts carried over into like the next game. He would put 2 in his pocket. I think it would carry over the next game. In the postseason, he really has been outcoached his entire postseason. He was outcoached this entire series. Kudos to him and to the Celtics for coming back and even getting to a Game 7. Only 3 other teams besides them have done that, to going down 3-0. But, in Game 1, they get up 47 points in the third quarter, and he doesn't call a single timeout. Like, come on. You got to, at some point, call a timeout and be like, guys, you gotta get your head out of your asses, and you gotta pick it up, or we're gonna lose this game. In Game 3, just that how pathetic their effort was. That it was absolutely pitiful. Kudos to him for owning up and saying, "Hey, this one's on me. I gotta be better," and having them win games 4, 5, and 6. But also, Game 6, they didn't play well. The Heat just played a little bit worse, and then they ended up getting. Obviously that late shot. And in Game 7, also Tatum can't get up and down the court. Tatum's got clearly he's got a bum ankle. Where it's sprained, whether he sprained it, however it was, he's clearly playing on a bum ankle. He can't get downhill, so he can't get to the hoop, which is probably his biggest strength. He's not shooting the ball well. He's not as impactful on the defensive end. You at some point you gotta say, you know what? Tatum's our best player, and he's arguably a top 5 player in this game. But he's not. He does not give us the best chance to win right now. And this is a game that we need to win. Obviously, it's Game 7. Winner goes to the finals. Loser, season's over. Let's take him out of the game. And then Jaylen Brown, oof, horrible, absolutely horrible. And also, like the Celtics, they couldn't hit a 3 for their life. At one point, they were 0 for 10. Like, how do you show up? How do you got all the momentum in the world in Game 6? You hit that crazy buzzer beater in Game 6, that crazy game. You come back home and you play as pitiful as you did. You were, as bad as you were from beyond the arc. Both your stars don't show up. Well, one was playing hurt. The other, Brown, was just flat out bad. That's just embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing. Like, I see no difference between them and the Phoenix Suns. Celtics they won 5 straight elimination games in the postseason, but they didn't. The one that mattered the most, they weren't able to get. Absolutely horrible. Suns obviously is much worse because they do it every single time, and they lost by 30. Celtics lost by what, 19 or 20. But good God, pathetic performance. A pathetic performance by the Boston Celtics. NBA Finals Game 1 is Thursday night. I'm very excited. Denver Nuggets against the Miami Heat. Nikola Jokic versus Jimmy Butler. A lot of people were saying, oh, it's going to be boring. Oh, it's going to be a terrible series. I don't agree with that. First of all, you got 2 of the league's best players. You got Jokic, who I think is the league's best player. Jimmy's another great player. I think has been, you flip a coin for who's been the best player in this series between Jokic and best player in this entire postseason. For Jokic and Jimmy. Jokic has been hands down the best in the Western Conference, and Jimmy's been hands down the best in the Eastern Conference. It's, just take your pick for who's been the best. Obviously, I think it was a year or 2 ago, you had that, when, Jokic and Butler got into a little scuffle and Jokic bumped them. So, it's going to be a very interesting series. As for who wins, I got Denver in 6 games. But the Miami has shocked the world. They still had a chance to beat Milwaukee, and they wiped the floor for them to beat them in 5. As a Knicks fan, I was confident going into that series against the Heat. A lot of people were picking the Knicks. They beat them in 6 games. No one thought they stood a chance against Boston. And they beat them in 7 games. Well, they went 3-0 in the first place. Who said they can't do it again against Denver, and another team that is much better than them, and they're going to be heavy underdogs. Boy, shout out to Jimmy Butler to going at the press conference after they lose Game 7 last year to the Boston Celtics, and say, next year we're going to be in this exact same spot. We're going to get it done. A year to the day, scores 28 points in Game 7 and gets it done in TD Garden. So shout out to Jimmy Butler. One of my favorite players in the league, absolute dog. But with this series, I think that he had no one for Jokic. You gotta at least try to limit Jokic. Like Jamal Murray, who's incredible. He's averaging like 27, 28 in this playoffs. He averaged 32 points on 50% shooting in the 4 games in the conference finals against the Lakers. But you're putting Bam on Jokic. Bam's a great defender. He was second team all defense for a reason, but he does struggle against the really big, the true big sometimes, because he is on the thin side. Nothing against him, and he is truly, although he has struggled Game 6, he was awful. He was not good in Game 7 either. I don't think he's had the best season, and he's been inconsistent in this postseason. I thought he was not good in the first round against Milwaukee. Overall, he was decent against the Knicks. The first couple games he wasn't great, but the last, I would say, 4 games he was good. He's had a couple. He hasn't been great this series. The last 2, he was terrible. But defensively, I feel like he's most part been there. But I think Jokic is just gonna kind of body him, kind of like me on the Eastern Conference Finals last year. Again, when he's facing a healthy Robert Williams, Robert Williams kind of just bullied him in the paint the whole series. I think there'll be something similar to that. And obviously, Jokic is a completely another category than Robert Williams. I would be surprised if Jokic averages 30, 40 a game. You have nobody that can even limit him. I mean, they could probably, like Jimmy Butler, he's a great defender and a great player, but just size wise, he's outmatched. Jimmy's what, 6'7", 6'8", if that. Jokic is 7 foot. He's absolutely jacked, absolute beast. On Murray, you could put Jimmy on him, but then you gotta worry about Kentavious Caldwell Pope, even Bruce Brown, Michael Porter Jr., who I think will probably put Jimmy on Porter. And so, who do you put on Jamal Murray? Do you put Max Strus on him? Is that the best matchup? Is the best matchup Kyle Lowry? If so, do you want to put Lowry back in the starting lineup? So I just don't think it's the right matchup for the Heat. That being said, they've proved everyone wrong to this point. Jimmy Butler is on one of the greatest postseason runs in NBA history when it comes to individual performances. So I think they hang around, but Denver wins in 6. That's my prediction. The Philadelphia 76ers hire Nick Nurse as their next head coach. I think it's a good hire. It's a good situation for Nurse. Obviously, he won a championship with the 2019 Raptors as their head coach and just let go. Apparently, he turned down he was between the Suns and the Sixers, and he chose the Sixers. I know I said yesterday that, sorry that we went out this morning. The podcast had some tech issues that he was. He pulled out of a Sixers search. I don't know what happened. I guess it was a fake rumor. Who knows? But apparently he could have went to Phoenix or Philly, and he chose Philly. But he's the next coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. In some really big news, Bob Myers has stepped down as the president of basketball operations for the Golden State Warriors, the mastermind behind the Golden State Warriors dynasty. He won 4 championships, went to the finals 6 times. And 2-time executive of the year, he has stepped down. As for what's next, their owner, Joe Lacob, is considering promoting a couple of guys. His son, Kirk Lacob, is the executive vice president of basketball operations. I'm hearing he might have a bigger role. And Mike Dunleavy Jr., who's the next player, he's the vice president of basketball operations for the Warriors. I heard both those guys could see elevated roles. We'll see where the Warriors go from here. They're definitely at a fork on the road in their franchise. We'll see what happens. DeAndre Hopkins has hired Clutch Sports, so he never really had an agent. Free agent for the first time in his career. He's hired an actual agent. And the only other thing I have for you guys is that there are 7 ACC teams trying to leave the conference. Clemson's one of the ringleaders around that. Florida State is involved, so keep your eyes peeled for that. All right, that's all I got for you guys today. Until next time, so long. Have a great day.